Hey, I don't know about you, but when I started working at an office and eventually attended more and more meetings, that it would have been nice to have an introduction to how meetings work, to how to prepare, what the etiquette was, and how to make sure that I got the most out of them. So today, pulling from the experience that I gathered working at corporate, I wanted to share a few tips on how you can be prepared for your next meeting. This is more from the attendee perspective and not the meeting organizer or leader. I'm gearing this video more towards group meeting settings instead of one-on-ones, just because one-on-one meetings have a different dynamic than a group meeting setting. And I don't know about you, but I think there's a little bit more to keeping the harmony in a group setting, making sure everyone works together to make the meeting go smoothly. We're assuming here that this is an in-person group meeting, so not only do you have to think about the discussion, planning that ahead of time, but also looking at the body language and having to get up more spontaneously to talk to your points or to show your work. And also, this video is not going to be super serious. There's going to be some kind of silly moments. So yes, I will exaggerate a bit, but I don't want this to be so dry that you fall asleep. We're continuing my series on office tips, how you can be productive and feel good so you can maximize your work efficiency. And so if you haven't seen the previous videos in this series, I'll put them in the description. I'm trying out this lifestyle work advice series. Usually I do style or travel, so check out those videos. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those videos. All right, let's get on to the first tip. Tip number one, whenever possible, arrive on time. You don't want to be that one person that walks in 20 minutes later saying sorry, stepping over people because you are running from another meeting, and meanwhile the presenter was midway giving the pros and cons and moving forward with the project. It just kind of kills the groove a bit. If you can't make it on time, you just have so many meetings, at least let the presenter know so that they can expect that you'll walk in at any time during the meeting and it's not a surprise. And most likely your other colleagues in the room have a dozen other meetings to attend, and now the meeting's just gone on a little longer. So if you want to get the most out of the meeting and not have the presenter repeat information they went over before, or because they get thrown aback with your sudden appearance, they gloss over important details they were going to cover, do your best to arrive on time. Number two, bring a notebook and a bottle of water. So I didn't always do this when I worked at the office, but looking back, I should have done it for every meeting. Having a notebook helps you jot down questions that you want to ask the presenter, organizer, or other attendees later to learn more about the project. It helps you remember important details. When you just carry the details in your brain, telling yourself, oh, I'll remember that later, 80% of the time, at least for me, you're not going to remember it later. You'll also be able to jot down some takeaway actions as a result of the meeting. You're not already trying to follow and remember what the presenter, organizer, or other speakers are saying. Don't give it extra work by trying to remember those details that are specific to you that you need to look into later. I included a bottle of water as a side tip. I think these are the two items that you should always bring to a meeting, because while this doesn't happen a lot of the time, the few times that it happens that someone has a coughing fit, they don't have any water, it is distracting for other people, even though, you know, they can't really help it usually. So just have a jug of water just in case that happens. If you need to clear your throat before you ask a question or make a comment, you can just sip a thing of water instead of having to go Oh, an extra tip, if you do bring a water bottle, get one with a handle or something that you can attach to yourself that you don't have to carry with your hands. Because I find that my hands got really full carrying my laptop, notebook, or any other extra accessories, and then I would just forget my water bottle or just leave it because I didn't have an easy way to carry it around without looking like I was juggling 20 items on my person. Number three, review the agenda ahead of the meeting whenever possible. So an agenda might not always be sent out for a meeting by the organizer. In that case, especially if it's a very key meeting in terms of moving forward a project or you're starting a new project, or there are roadblocks to discuss, for example, I would go back to the organizer and ask for an agenda. Being able to review the agenda helps make sure that you know the entire story, or as much of the story as possible, of the project, so that you'll be able to bring examples if you want to back up a point during the meeting, or really drill down into any specificities of a project, especially if there's a major issue you want to address. And because that issue will be addressed during the meeting, you can have examples of how you want to solve that from your end. This makes it so that the meeting really focuses on the main topics that you all want to discuss, and so that there isn't any quote-unquote dilly-dallying. Again, we all have limited time during the day, and a lot of the day is taken up by meetings for a lot of people. So it's good to get to the point of the meeting and get down to solving what needs to be solved or what needs to be discussed, so that everyone can go back to their desk and focus on that issue. You'll be able to ask questions that aren't so general, that just might take up important time, or maybe some of the key problems, or some of the controversy that was supposed to be discussed during the meeting just becomes a story time of the issue that maybe half of the room already knew about. So just have that agenda so that you can get as much backstory. Number 4, ask questions. Nothing is worse, I feel like, during a meeting where the presenter, organizer, leader just feels like they're talking to themselves and asks, are there any questions? And then it's just dead silence throughout the 60 minutes. Of course, going back to the previous point, don't just fill the silence with filler questions. A good way to think of questions is ahead of time looking over the agenda, the FAQ, or any documents related to the project, so that you can ask meaningful questions that many others in the room might have as well, so that you can get the information you need, so that you can make the right decisions to move forward with your part of the project, or something that might have to do with the project that the meeting is going on about. This is also going to save time for the leader as well. They're not going to get a huge slew of questions after the meeting that could have been asked during the meeting and addressed, and saved everyone another long email or even more questions. Caveat though is if the question is very personal, for example, am I going to be paid more because I'm taking on 2 times more than my current workload? I don't think that would be a question you should ask during a group meeting. I would leave that for a personal discussion with your manager. Number 5, don't interrupt. What I usually found when someone interjected maybe mid-sentence of what the presenter was saying, they were going to get to that point later on anyway, and now they just lost their train of thought, and again may end up glossing over important details related to the point that they were speaking on, or key building block details toward that point that you were asking about. And some people get flustered. I know I got flustered sometimes when someone would interrupt halfway, and I would end up giving more of a half-baked explanation because I lost my train of thought. So unless you asked a question and the presenter, whoever was answering it, misunderstood the question, so you wanted to get them back on track faster, or it seems that there's too much focus on a minuscule piece and you want to help guide the conversation back to the key points as to what the meeting was about, I would try my best not to interrupt. And also I find a lot of interruptions to just be rude. Comment below and let me know if you agree. Or maybe if you have a polite way of interrupting, I'd like to know. I try to be diplomatic, so sometimes when there are times that I do need to interrupt, it's really hard for me to get in there, if you know what I'm saying. And this relates back to an earlier tip, but don't drag on a question you're asking that's really only relevant to you during a group meeting. It'd probably be best to schedule a follow-up one-on-one meeting, or to even just have a separate meeting, or even possibly discuss it through email or chat so that you can cover maybe the specific pieces of the project that you're working on. Or if you have questions about how maybe your job is changing or something that was suddenly put on your plate and you didn't expect it, I think the best way to deal with that would be to chat with your manager or whoever is in charge of that project in general. Everyone has limited productive time during the day, so it's best to be courteous and maybe right after the meeting or ahead of the meeting if you already know, send the presenter, organizer, or whoever you need to talk to an email so that you can catch up on that piece later. And the last tip is don't do work while the meeting is in session. So this wasn't something that I saw all the time, but I did see in at least a handful of meetings there would be people that would be on their laptops trying to answer an email or put out a fire by instant messaging a product owner of another project that they were on. And frankly, I think if there's a fire that you're trying to put out, I would just kindly excuse yourself from the meeting and handle it, because you're not going to get much more out of the current meeting that you're sitting in, and it can be just distracting, you pounding on your keyboard. If you're just trying to handle something very quickly, instant message or email the person that you're chatting with and letting them know that you'll get to it right after the meeting, or say to the presenter that you need to leave in 15 minutes to handle something. I think those are good ways to deal with that situation without distracting the other meeting attendees from getting as much possible from the current meeting. And I know it can be tempting to start preparing for your next meeting while you're at this meeting, especially if you have, back-to-back meetings in the afternoon. But you're at that meeting usually because you need to know that information so you can move forward with the project. And if you don't need to be at that meeting, you might need to have a conversation with someone as to why you're at that meeting. So those are my tips for how to be a good meeting attendee and how to get most out of your meetings. And I'd love to continue this series maybe with more specific meeting type tips, maybe tips for the presenter or tips for how to do web meetings. I think it'd be useful to know about those. Anyways, wherever you work, I hope that you're productive, having a little bit of fun at least. Work's not always fun, but wherever we can make it easier, I think that'd be a good thing. I'll end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye!